ADD in the brain. What is ADD? ADD is one of the most diagnosed conditions in all of North America. Symptoms include short attention span, anger, impulsive reactions, disorganization, procrastination, forgetfulness, addiction problems, laziness, and overreaction. I personally am diagnosed with ADD. All right. ADD has a lot of effects on memory. People with ADD have a problem with what we call working memory. Their memory is always a bit challenged when they do elaborate tasks. They have what I like to call a lazy frontal cortex or a sleepy cortex. It has to be woken up all the time. It needs that extra kick or that extra kick, if you will, to be pumped up and to focus on the task at hand. If it doesn't get that kick, if you don't kick your brain like that, then the frontal cortex is less empowered and you have less ability to hold things in mind for a longer period of time. People with ADD have what I like to call selective memory. A child with ADD might remember that likes video games can sit in front of his computer for hours on end and not forget anything he does while he plays these video games. Yet when he's at school, he can't pay attention or remember anything in class for more than 5 minutes. That's because it's this area of the frontal cortex is sort of not turned on enough, and it's not like charged by the task at hand. All right. People with ADD often have problems with anger and impulsive reactions. People with they often throw temper tantrums and have and act on impulses in any given situation. Well, in some situations. You often see children go into uncontrollable rages or temper tantrums. And in adults, you often see it in road rage, where let's just say you have ADD and you're driving behind someone, and they're going slowly along their merry way, and you're late to work, let's just, for example. You get into this rage, and it's like if a survival switch in your brain is turned on. This survival switch is the amygdala. It turns on too quickly, and you see the situation as a survival issue as opposed to just something that you have to deal with. And so your energy goes into that to the response to what you perceive as a threat. So you fly into this rage, and you can't think rationally. You don't have enough control over your amygdala, over the amygdala, and or the anger button. It is too sensitive at times, and so it can lead to over-response on its own. And the frontal cortex also isn't as turned on as it needs to be in those situations to help put on the brakes and say, okay, flying off the handles, I gotta calm down for a second and see what's really going on. Look at it from the outside. People with ADD are actually, because of the over-responsive amygdala, people with ADD have been very good in survival situations. All of a sudden, they can be very logical, and they can be extremely competent in directing things and living up to the challenges of the moment. They give them these situations give them a stimulation, and they're able to perform very well under pressure. Also, people with ADD are extremely prone to addiction. Basically, the limbic part of the attention system in your brain, the mesolimbic dopamine system, or as some call it, the reward network, is flawed. People with ADD have a difference in their genes that have less dopamine, and they have less dopamine 2 receptors in their brain. This causes them not to have enough motivation to sustain attention situations that aren't highly charged. So they seek high intensity activities or high intensity situations. This causes all kinds of addiction problems. There is this need for enough of a stimulus out there, enough of a challenge for the whole system to overcome the difference. So people with ADD try to find something to get their dopamine up and to give their brain the kind of juice and kick that they need and they want. They like that feeling and end up getting addicted. All right, so the difference between uh, treated cases of ADD and non-treated cases. Well, studies show that um, teens in their early 20s are that have ADD and that isn't treated are 2 times more prone to have addiction problems than people who have ADD but that is treated. This is because I'm going to talk about this after. The medication that the treated patients take has enough dopamine in it to sustain them without getting them buzzed or high, and the ones that aren't treated, the people that aren't treated, end up trying to find things that end up subconsciously giving them more enough dopamine to be satisfied. All right, so it's not only drugs that we are prone to be addicted to. It's also video games. So, but let me start with drugs. All addictive drugs, what they do is they flood the reward system in your brain, the mesolimbic system, dopamine system, with dopamine. They give you more dopamine than you need, and the more you overstimulate your brain by taking these drugs, the more your brain adapts to the overwhelming surges of dopamine. And how it does this is it reduces the number of dopamine 2 receptors in your brain. This makes you enjoy the drugs less and seek harder drugs. It also worsens your ADD because people with ADD have less dopamine 2 receptors in their brain. Now they're going to have even less of that. All right, so there's also video games. Kids, you often see a lot of kids with ADD that are extremely, extremely addicted to video games because it gives them a high intensity situation. Whereas like they can stay playing video games for hours on end, but can't focus in school for 10 minutes. That is because it gives them the thrill-seeking environment that the brain wants as a stimulation that it needs, kind of the kick. It also has a survival issue to it. If you lose in the game, you end up dying in the virtual environment. So it's a survival issue to try to pass these tests, if you will, of the video game. Overcoming your ADD. Procrastination and how to solve it. So, as you may know, I am a very, 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 very big advertiser of procrastination. I do it constantly. But let me just talk about people that have ADD. So people with ADD tend to do things at the last minute and procrastinate because it gives them a sort of thrill, if you will. The feeling of rushing to finish off your homework at the last second and feeling extremely productive under stress gives us a kind of high. And I can attest to this as I do it on a constant basis. I even find that I work better under pressure and that a lot of the times, if I have a lot of time on the task at hand, I don't end up doing it. I have to learn to train myself to know that I'm going to forget what I need to do, and that I need to take a second and think about think about what I'm supposed to do, so I can hopefully make less errors and forget things less often. Like, for instance, taking out the trash. If I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it after. A great trick to remember is Ohio, which stands for only handle it once. Which means if you have to do something, do it right now, because in 30 seconds, you're not going to remember what it was, and you're not going to do it. You have to take time to. Another solution is taking time to plan things, which is really cruel to someone with ADD. We're like allergic to structure. We rebel against it. But unfortunately, we all need it. So training and practice. People with ADD need to learn to develop habits. It's extremely important. The trick is, I use this trick personally. I text myself a chore every night before I go to bed, or every time I need to do something, every time I'm told to do something. The trick is to write things down so that you don't end up forgetting them. When you do that, you begin to work your frontal cortex in and begin to get resources that aren't there yet, that help you put on the brakes and think rationally, or help you remember things. People with ADD have to learn to set standards for themselves, set ideas of what they think of themselves, set expectations for themselves, and train themselves to be more organized, to plan better, to consider their response before they respond. Also, to give them a couple seconds before they scream or have another impulsive reaction. So there are three very good ways of kind of controlling your ADD. There's meditation, medication, and exercise. So meditation is a very helpful. It's sort of training for your brain to get calmer. It decreases that trigger or amygdala or anger button, improving the frontal cortex at the same time. Exercise also helps enormously because it creates more dopamine in the brain and helps you stimulate all those neurotransmitters that have to do with activating your frontal cortex. And they keep the arousal centers in your brain less on edge. Prescribed medication is also a good alternative. Prescribed medication are dopamine stimulants like Ritalin and Adderall. I take Adderall personally. And they help because they turn turn on this system that is a little bit flagging and that over responds and overreacts in our brain. What it really does is keep you in check and restrains you from flying off the handles all the time, having rage attacks and keeping your it keeps your mind from wandering off. The only thing I don't like about taking medication for your ADD is that medications, no matter what, always come with side effects. And some side effects aren't that bad, but some I don't enjoy personally. Like I take Adderall, and a big side effect is paranoia. And it's not always present, but a lot of times you feel it, and it kind of gets on your nerve a bit. And you have to remember that you have to make sure that the medication is prescribed by a doctor, and not to use recreational drugs as an alternative solution, because it really isn't. All right. That was ADD. That was the brain and ADD. Thank you very much.